Good afternoon and welcome to episode 2 of the Inside Greyhound Athletics Podcast. My name is Ryan Shoemaker and I am pleased to be joined today by head men's soccer coach Jon Fridal. Coach, appreciate you joining us.
Thanks for having me.
Now, as you know, this podcast is intended to give an inside look at the current, past, and future states of all of our athletic programs. And looking back to last year, I would say that it was definitely a positive season in the world of Greyhound men's soccer. Finishing with a record of 12-5-1, breaking the school record for wins in a single season. When you take a look back at 2019, what are some of the moments that stuck out to you for that season?
Yeah, I mean, I think we made some positive steps. There's some things that we're really proud of, and obviously it's nice to receive recognition, in terms of being nationally ranked, which we achieved, through the first half of the season. Some of the big highlights for me, though, I think, getting off to a fast start, beating Fort Hays State is a highlight that, I'll remember, going on the road and beating Colorado Mesa when they were, number 17, and then, beating Midwestern State at home. I think those three were, three big statement wins that have gone a long ways for us in terms of recruiting and kind of showing what we're about. Obviously, like I said, some really good highlights for the season. One of the things that is regrettable is, despite having that kind of talent and potential to do something great, with all the injuries that we had in the second half of the season, we kind of slowed down a little bit, and that's a regret, I think, for everybody that's returning, is just feeling like we didn't accomplish what we set out to do in terms of making the postseason and making a run at a conference title. So a lot of positives from last year, but we still have plenty of work to do.
Looking at the total body of work for you, 2 seasons as the head coach, moving into season number 3, it's definitely going to be a unique season, but give me your assessment of the program right now and the state of the program heading into year number 3.
I think it's just kind of like what I said, just unfinished business. So we had the talent on paper to beat anybody in the country last year, and we proved that on more than one occasion. And I think, same thing with anybody in this conference, obviously. And when you have that talent, then that's the goal, is to go get it done and to win. So that was our goal last year. Like I said, it kind of got derailed halfway through the season. I do think we are deeper this year. We've lost some pieces that I think were really valuable pieces for us. Alcides Duarte was a big, option for us. We played him at right back. We played him at center mid. He's a big loss. Charlie Hackshaw contributed a lot last year. He's an incredible player. So losing him is, big pieces or big shoes to fill. There's a number of guys in there that really contributed and helped us along our way. But I think we've brought in some really talented players this year that really make us very deep. So even in the event where we run into a crazy amount of injuries again, which I don't foresee that happening in a 7-game season, we should have plenty of talent that is competing and giving us cover. So our goal this year is just to pick up where we left off and hopefully take it where it should have gone last year.
As unique as this offseason has been for everyone, I think your roster and your program is even more unique. You have kids from all over the world in different time zones, different schedules. How has the offseason looked for your program? How much work were you able to get in before campus shut down in March, and what has been your game plan and attack this fall semester without having the guys here physically on campus?
Right now it's kind of challenging. We've got guys just kind of on the honor system. They know what they're coming into. Guys that have, before I came here 2 years ago, I was at Indian Hills. We've had a number of guys that have followed us here. So they've been with me. This will be their 4th year. And because some of them, are seniors and will get an extra year of eligibility, they'll get me for a 5th year even. But they know what recruiting's like in a program that I'm running, and every year it just gets more and more competitive. So that's kind of how we hold guys accountable, is listen, if you want to take the fall off and not do anything, then I think you're not going to be ready to play come spring because somebody else is. And so, just from following up with guys regularly, I know we're fortunate that these guys are serious players. They're serious about their academics. They're serious about, their sport, and everybody's working hard right now. It is tough to really do a lot of organized activity because we have we have 33 players that are spread across 10 time zones, so it's almost impossible to do, team meetings or care activities or virtual workouts. But we are fortunate that in most countries soccer has resumed, and so a lot of our guys are back home playing with, amateur teams or semi-pro teams, and they're allowed to do that right now because of the situation that we're in. And I'd say that, some of those games are going to be valuable experience for the guys, and that's the positive spin we're taking out of it. In terms of the spring, obviously we didn't come back after spring break, but we were fortunate to get a couple games in our non-championship segment in the spring. So I think there are some things that we were working on, trying to add a second formation in so that when we play teams the second time around, we have a different look to give them. And I think we ironed out a few things, and we have a pretty good idea of what works and what doesn't work in some of these new systems. Mm-hmm. And I'm looking forward to that this year. I think we'll start off the way we normally do, but second half of the year when we're playing a team, the way it's set up this year in 7 games, by the time you get to the playoffs, you might have played a team for the 3rd time now. Mm-hmm. We're going to need to be able to give them a different look, and I think we're in a situation where we're pretty well adjusted to be able to do that.
One of those guys that was with you at Indian Hills and has continued his career here at Eastern New Mexico and really stepped into the spotlight last year was Ross Dalton, your senior keeper that'll be returning. He was named the LSC Goalkeeper of the Year in 2019. He's been with you for a long time, and I know you think the world of him as both a player and an individual. What makes him so special?
Just a hard worker, and I think he's grown a lot since he's gotten to the U.S. and gotten into the college system, but he's just somebody that's constantly looking to improve himself, and that's what it takes. If you want to be a high-level athlete in college, if you want to be a professional afterwards, it's not just about talent. It's about your mindset, your work ethic, your mentality, and he really is the full package from that standpoint.
Gabriel Perez, anybody that's watched Greyhound men's soccer the last 2 years can definitely see the impact he has from an individual talent perspective on the field. Unfortunately, last year they saw that impact because he wasn't on the field for a few games. Coming back from an injury and moving into his senior year as well, he as well was with you at Indian Hills. Talk about what really separates him on the field from other players, and how is he so difficult to game plan for?
I mean, he's just that guy that takes pressure off everybody. It doesn't matter just what the scenario is. If he's under a lot of pressure, you can give him the ball and he's going to keep it. And it's one of those things where you can force the ball into his feet. It can be a bad pass, or the quality of the pass can be very poor, and he's still going to handle it. So he takes a lot of pressure off guys from that standpoint. And being Brazilian, he's got a lot of flair going forward. So he's very difficult when he's in a very creative mood to handle when he's going forward. And he showed that. He gave an All-American right back last year the runaround against Fort Hays State for 90 minutes, and I think that I've never seen a kid more relieved for a game to be over, and then he had a big game when we finally got him back in the second half of the season against Midwestern State. So he's just a big game player, and when he's not available, we miss him. So
Robbie Jenkinson and Joaquin Burrell, both two center backs that I think really kind of embody the spirit and the grit of this team, especially last year at the beginning of the season when it took the offense a little bit to get going. Those two guys really stepped up and kept pressure on opposing forwards. What makes that tandem? Jenkinson was an all-region selection, and Burrell I know you will agree, I think has missed out on some postseason accolades that he may have rightfully deserved. What makes the combination of those two players so difficult for other teams to score on?
I think they just bring a physical presence that is really important at this level. And that's something that I think we lacked my first year here. Obviously we had Joaquin, but bringing Robbie in is a really good compliment. When they're on their day, they're reading the game really well, they're stepping in and they're picking passes, but at the same time, if they need to win a physical battle, that's not a battle they're going to lose very often. So early on in the season, I think we had 4 shutouts in the first 6 games, and it was against 6 very good teams. I think it was Fort Hays, Mesa, which were both nationally ranked, Westminster, which received votes and was ranked later in the year, and then Montana State Billings is one of the better teams up in the GNAC. So, it was really impressive what they put together in terms of keeping clean sheets through those games and keeping some of those teams to low opportunities. So.
On the offensive side of the ball, 2 focal points that will be coming back this spring and hopefully in the fall, Julian Trapp and Joe Conway. I don't know that you could pick 2 opposite players, yet they are both so effective in their own ways. Describe each of them as a player, and how much of an advantage is it to have guys like that up front that are so different yet so effective when it comes to putting the ball in the back of the net?
Yeah, Julian's a big presence. He's 6'3", thick, but has feet like a midfielder. He can really just hold the ball up well. Same kind of thing as with Paris. Like, you can give him a jump pass and he's just going to settle it and hold the ball, and that's a nightmare for a lot of coaches at the college level. We're always pushing him to try to be a little more dangerous, get higher up the field. He wasn't kind of developed as a striker. It's something he kind of came into late in his career, so he doesn't have those predatory instincts that a guy like Joe has. Joe's a striker through and through, and you can tell like he's out there to score goals, and he's a great finisher. He's got those instincts, and Joe is more the type of guy that wants to get in behind. I think over the course of the year we saw his game, his ability to play with his back to goal develop a little bit more. So we're starting to see more confidence, especially in spring, with him turning players and trying to take them on. But that's kind of the 1-2 punch that we get out of those 2. And that's ideal for us because we play with 2 strikers, which is different. The trend in this day and age is to play with 1 striker and more center mids, more guys in your midfield. But we do kind of the opposite. We stick with 2 in the middle of the park in our midfield, and we like to play with 2 strikers. So they're a very good complement to one another in terms of, like you said, bringing something different. So Julian's going to want it to his feet a little bit more, while Joe's going to look to be, a little more cutting edge with his movement off the ball and his runs. So both of them, they were our 2 leading scorers this past year. I think Joe had 7, and Julian I think he had 7 as well.
I think he did.
Yeah. But there's a reason they both received recognition. So they're the ideal foil for our system to be able to play up there together.
As many unknowns as there were throughout the spring, there was one known thing that we experienced here at EMU Athletics, and that's Jon Fridal coming in with a new signing every single week throughout the spring semester. What were some of the qualities and traits you were looking for as you built your class moving into what was supposed to be this fall but has now moved to this spring and for the years beyond?
There's 3 things we look for when we recruit players. Obviously, first and foremost, can they play? Can they do the things that we are going to ask them to do in our system? Obviously for us, because we like to keep the ball so much, technique is like one of the first things we look at. Like, are you able to play out of pressure? What are your feet like? How good's your first touch? How do you read the game? How fast do you process things? And then from there, looking at, okay, do you have the extra attributes like speed and strength, things like that, obviously you need to have in order to be a next level player. You got to be a next level athlete. But then beyond that, we're looking, especially now, are you a good student? Knowing that, not knowing how long the pandemic's going to last, you need people that take their degree very seriously, because you're not going to be able to babysit guys. It's hard enough to do that under normal circumstances, and now even more so. Like, you have to be self-sufficient and serious as a student. And then the third thing we look for is, are you a good person? And that's hard to necessarily pick up on in the recruiting process, but we do the most we can to try to get to know the guys we're recruiting, and it's not a proven science, but for the most part, I think we're doing a great job of getting excellent people in here.
Now, you stole a little bit of my fire on this next question, but nothing is official, but it does look like we're going to be playing a spring schedule, somewhere between 7, 8, 9, 10 games. It's going to be unique, but I think, listening to what you've said today and just knowing a little bit about the roster and the talent that's on the roster, do you feel like this schedule setup almost helps your team a little bit? Building off of last year, they want to get that unfinished business finished, only playing a quick 7, 8, 9 games against teams they're very familiar with. Do you think that kind of bodes well for your squad right now?
I don't know if it's necessarily any more advantageous. I think we're in a good situation, even though we're not training this fall, and most schools are. We have a lot of returners, so there's a lot of guys that are familiar with our system. So the new players that we have coming in, even though it's a larger class, they're going to have a lot of guys to learn from. So there's a lot of good examples out there, especially if you're a new guy in your position. There's people that are returning that are, you can look at as an example as to, the best way to do things. And, whether it's an 18-game season or a 7-game season, I think we're in a good position either way. But certainly 7 games, if our biggest issue last year was injuries, then I think 7 games may bode well in terms of making sure we avoid that. Because 1 game a week versus 2 games a week is a very big difference. I think it's a good thing that we're doing that this spring, as opposed to trying to play 14 or 15 games, because some of these guys haven't played a competitive game in a while. Like I said, a lot of them are back playing right now, but there are a handful that aren't. Going over a year, almost a year and a half now, without a competitive game, and then jumping into 2 games a week, that would be a detriment, I think, to try to overcome. So I think we're in a good spot to kind of ease into things this spring and still compete and compete for a title. So.
Anybody that watches your program compete can see that you have a tight-knit group of guys, and when you're bringing kids in from all over the world, that's got to be a difficult process, especially throughout the beginning of each season, and just getting all those guys in a flow, getting them to know each other, understand their cultures. How have you been able to accomplish that, not only here at Eastern New Mexico, but also at Indian Hills? What are some of the things that you try and instill in your program so that process happens at a much faster pace?
I don't know that we have an exact blueprint to it every year, because every group's a little different. But one of the things that we really stress that is during the recruiting process is that our group is very tight-knit. And that's our expectation, is that guys treat each other like family, and it's almost like you're here to, like, if you're really putting the team first and the guys next to you first, it's almost like you have a mentality of servitude. I've heard a couple coaches use it that term, and I really like that, actually. And so we kind of get that mindset right away that this is what it is. The guys have their own group chats. Most teams have that these days, and so they have a lot of fun in there. So even before you get here, if you've already signed with us, we put you in there, over the summer, and you kind of get to know guys a little bit. It's a little off-putting at first because you're hearing jokes maybe, and you don't quite know the personality of the person making the joke, but you're at least getting to see how guys are interacting with one another. And then I think once you get here, because everybody's in the same boat for the most part, where they're coming farther from home. We do have some in-state kids, don't get me wrong, but a lot of our guys are coming from overseas, so you really have no choice but to get to know people, because you don't have that crutch of being able to go home this weekend and see your family. There's a time difference for a lot of the guys, so late at night you can't be on the phone with your family because they're in bed sleeping. So it kind of forces guys to get to know one another. And then also, a lot of our guys live off campus, and we'll get 3, 4, 5 guys living in one residence, and so you get to know each other pretty well when you're in that circumstance. So
I would definitely say so. Now let's talk a little bit about Jon Fridal, the soccer player. Not as much the coach, but the soccer player. You competed at a very high level throughout your career, which ultimately ended up as a professional career in multiple indoor leagues. You made mention to it today, but you know that you have a lot of guys on the team that look to continue their soccer career after Eastern New Mexico University. What is your message to them on how to make that happen, how to have a successful professional career, and what they need to work on, not only here, but also when they leave here to make that dream a reality?
I mean, the biggest thing is your mentality. You got to have that professional mindset, which is every day, what do I got to do today to get better? And is there anybody out there that's working harder than me today? If that's your answer, then if the answer is, yeah, there are people out there working harder than me today, then you're probably not going to go on and be a pro. I tell guys all the time, being a professional athlete is glamorous for about 1% of the professional athletes out there. For everyone else, it's a 9-to-5 grind, and probably more than that. You really gotta love the process. And we have a couple guys that are, no doubt, very talented, but I just question if they have that, love of the process to end up, wanting to be a 10-year professional that's grinding out a paycheck month to month like that. So we'll see, but that's what I tell guys. Like, you can't be a pro if you don't really love what you're doing, and I think we have a few, but that's really the big thing. And it's almost the same. Like, it's hard to be, even we tell kids this at our ID camps. It's hard to be a high-level college athlete if you don't love the process. Unless you're just exceptionally gifted in terms of ability, it's hard to just skate through and be successful at the college level even. So,
what do you feel like is the next step for this program? The last 2 years have been phenomenal. Setting the school record in wins. You mentioned unfinished business, and not making the postseason last year was definitely something that your team has taken to heart and looks to fix coming into this spring schedule. But after the spring schedule is complete and we move back into the fall where there hopefully will be an NCAA tournament, what's the next step?
Obviously there's no NCAA tournament this spring, but I think our focus right now is just on the short term. We have an opportunity to compete for a conference title this year. There is a postseason in the conference this year, so we need to make the postseason. We need to win a game in the postseason, obviously, but I think our ambitions are much bigger than that. Like I said, you're beating 3 ranked teams in a season. You should probably be having that as a goal, and that's where we are. Like, our goal this year is to win a conference title, and if we don't accomplish that, I'm sure there's positives that we'll be able to take away from the season, but ultimately we will not have reached our goal.
Well, Coach, I appreciate you joining us today, and I think I speak on behalf of Greyhound Nation that watching your program develop and succeed last year was exciting, and I think everybody is excited for what's to come. Really appreciate you taking the time to speak with us today, and good luck.
I appreciate it. Thank you.